The Pittsburgh Penguins entered their 22nd NHL season as a primarily young team existing of players all 28 years old and younger. A great mix of talent and physicality, a team of some pretty good size for the time period, and the foundation to build a future back-to-back championship squad. Let's get into how this team was built up, how they did during the regular season and playoff-wise, and what they did during the draft in the offseason to potentially work on continuing building a team up. Let's get into the breakdown of their roster. Mario did most of the legwork for this team, putting up 85 goals and 114 assists for 199 points to lead the entire NHL. He also led the Penguins by 84 points. However, guys like Dan Quinn helped with the offensive load, picking up a respectable 94 points. Rookie John Cullen added 49 points down the middle. Gritty veteran Dave Hannon added 30, and then between Jock Callender and Dave McLean, they added 14 points in 54 games. Their winger depth was a bit bare to say the least. 20-year-old Rob Brown playing alongside Mario would get a substantial boost, eclipsing for 115 points in 68 games. After the season, he would only put up 279 over his next 424 career games. However, between the remaining 12 forwards, they got 195 points. Key future pieces like Mark Recchi and Kevin Stevens would spend more time in the IHL than the NHL that season. From a defensive standpoint, the Pens were led by Hall of Famer Paul Coffey, who is the third of 3 players on their roster to eclipse 110 points. 20-year-old Zarli Zalapski would drive in 45 points in 58 games. The rest of the defensive core was primarily made of defensive-minded D-men, with the likes of Randy Hiller, Jim Johnson, Steve Dykstra, Rod Buskus, Chris Dahlquist, and Gordon Dineen. However, the biggest thing that happened this year for the Penguins is an early season trade with the Buffalo Sabres in November 1988. The Buffalo Sabres would trade former 5th overall pick and Calder winner from 1984, Tom Barrasso, to the Pittsburgh Penguins in exchange for Doug Bodger, who went 9th overall in 1984, and the left winger Darren Shannon, who was picked 4th overall 5 months before. So a couple big pieces going in for Tom Barrasso. Barrasso would help solidify the goaltending in Pittsburgh in front of backups Wendell Young, Frank Pietrangelo, and Rick Tabarachi. They did also have a goalie by the name of Steve Gannett, but he was dealt in January of '89 for a 6th round draft pick. The Penguins are a pure offensive team at this point in time, mainly due to their 3 100-plus point players. They would finish with 347 goals for, which put them 3rd amongst 21 teams, and they allowed 349, which was 20th among 21 teams. The offense would have them finish as the 6th best team in the league with a record of 40, 33, and 7. Forgot to note this was an 80-game season. The main highlight of the season was Mario Lemieux's iconic 5-goal game, which he scored in 5 different ways, those being even strength, shorthanded, on the power play, a penalty shot, and an empty net, something I believe that has not been replicated since. In the first round, the Penguins would take on the 9th ranked New York Rangers, who were coming off a 37, 35, and 8 record, led by 88-point scorer Thomas Sandstrom. With the Penguins having a huge offensive edge, the Rangers would simply could not keep up with them and would get swept in 4 games and outscored 19-11 over that span. The second round would bring the state rival Philadelphia Flyers to the forefront. Despite finishing 10th in the league, the Flyers posed a major experience advantage. They had been to 2 cup finals over the last 4 seasons, and as you'd expect the Flyers team to be, they were all very gritty with 9 guys above 100 penalty minutes. One of those being goalie Ron Hextall, who also helped the Flyers to being the 7th best defensive team. This matchup, however, would be quite the battle, with both teams trading wins all the way to Game 7, when the Flyers would be the first to win 2 in a row. Most games are very close, even a game on April 25th, 1989, which ended in a 10-7 Pittsburgh win. Mario ended up with an 8-point effort in that game. Final goals in the series read 31-24 for Philadelphia, as Pittsburgh fell back into their struggling defensive hockey like they did during the regular season. This playoff run would be a glimpse of what was to come in the early 90s for this franchise. The draft saw the Penguins pick up a whole lot of nothing. They seemed to have targeted defensemen with most of their picks, and rightfully so with the season they just had. 16th overall, they drafted defenseman Jamie Heward, who would have a respectable 394 games, but not one of those games with the Pittsburgh Penguins. He wouldn't debut in 1995-96 when he signed with the Toronto Maple Leafs. 37th overall, they would take another defenseman who once again had no games as a Penguin, as he was taken in the 1993 expansion draft by the Florida Panthers, that being noted face puncher Paul Laus. And they had 2 of their 13 picks play NHL games. First was Todd Nelson, who played 3 career games and only 1 as a Penguin, who was picked 79th. And lastly, Mike Needham, who played most of all Penguins picks that year with the club, and that was still only 81 games with them of his 86 game career. You're probably wondering who they could have had instead. Well, they could have grabbed goaltender Olaf Kolzig, who went 19th overall and would have been a teammate of Jamie Heward down the road. Or maybe they could have went with Hall of Fame defenseman Nick Lidstrom, who went 53rd overall. Or maybe another Hall of Famer like Sergei Fedorov, who went 74th overall. Mind you, I think they did okay with who they got a year later and what happened in his subsequent years to follow.